Hello everybody. Today we're going to be learning about dot plots. Dot plots are one type of graph that we will be using as we move through our unit on statistics. A dot plot is special because we use a number line and dots to display numerical data. So whenever our data is numerical, which means numbers, we could use a dot plot to organize that. Sometimes you will see X's over the number line instead of dots, but it is still the same idea, okay? Dot plot. I've even seen these referred to as line plots, okay? So here we have our first dot plot that we're going to look at. As with any graph or chart or table, always look for a title and labels so we know what sort of information we are looking at. This one is written underneath the number line, and it is showing us data about pulse in beats per minute at rest. Okay, so we have a group of people, I assume. I guess it didn't tell us that, but let's assume this is a group of people, and it's showing their pulse at rest. So let's just kind of work through this list of questions and practice reading and gathering data from a dot plot. We're also going to be analyzing the data or kind of looking at what it tells us. Okay, so number one, what is the lowest pulse? So if we look at our dot plot, we can see there were two people that had a pulse of 64 beats per minute. Okay, the highest pulse would be 80 beats per minute. There was one person that had that pulse. Let's go back to the lowest pulse for a minute. Our number line shows 62, but notice there were no dots above 62. So even though that is shown, because there's no dot above it, we know there was no person in this out of this group or this set of data that had a pulse of 62 beats per minute. Okay, moving on, number two, how would you describe the general spread of the data? So when you look kind of at the general layout, I kind of see that it goes like this. So I would say that overall, it's sort of symmetrical. It's not exactly symmetrical, but it's close. So I think we could say overall it's sort of symmetrical. Sometimes we describe the general spread of the data as being skewed to the left or skewed to the right, but I don't see that here. I would describe this as being mostly symmetrical. Okay, what is the most common heart rate? The most common is going to be like the mode, if you remember that, or the one that occurs the most often, and that would be 70 beats per minute. Okay, because that had the most amount of people. There were 6 people who had a pulse of 70 beats per minute. Number 4, what pulse describes the center of the data? So again, if you look kind of overall at all of the data, I would say the center is going to be in that 70 beat per minute range again. You could say that the center of the data is from 68 to 72. I'm going to write it over here, sorry. So sometimes when you're analyzing your data, your answers can vary a little bit depending on how you're explaining yourself, I guess. Okay, so you could probably say that the exact center would be 70 beats per minute, or you could also say the center of our data falls around 68 to 72 beats per minute. Number 5, how many people had a pulse over 76? So over 76 means we would not include that person right at 76, but just anybody over that. And we would just have one person, the person who had 80 beats per minute. And then number 6, how many people were surveyed? In order to figure this one out, you're going to have to count how many dots there are all together because each dot represents a person. And if you were to add all of those up, you would find that there were 24 people surveyed. Okay, here we go. We're going to take a look at another dot plot. This one is about the number of text messages students sent in an hour. Okay, so I always just kind of like to look at my graph before I jump right into the questions. You can see our number line is going from 12 to 18. So that means there were 2 students who sent 12 text messages in an hour. It goes all the way up to 18. There were 2 students also who sent 18 text messages in an hour. So our first question, what was the most text messages sent? That would be 18 messages. Where is a cluster? So that could be a new word for you. Cluster is like a group. So where is most of our data grouped together? I would say this over here is our cluster. Again, your answers can vary a little bit on these types of questions, but I'm going to say our cluster is from 12 to 15 messages. Where is a gap? So a gap is going to be where there is no data. So in this situation, 16 to 17 messages is a gap because there were no students who sent that amount of text messages. How many students were texting? So again, you're going to add up how many dots there were. And we would find that there are 12 students who are texting. Okay, we should be labeling our answers every time. So if you haven't, go back and do that. We could label each of these messages also. All right, how many students sent less than 15 messages? Less than 15. So again, with the wording here, we aren't going to include those that sent exactly 15. We want less than that. So we would say 6 students. Okay, one more thing I want to add to this. It's not on here, but you guys can add it. We have what we call outliers whenever we're talking about our data. Outliers would be any piece of data that is much higher or much lower than the rest of your data. So in this case, I think we could say that 18 could be an outlier. Those 2 students that sent 18 messages, that was a little bit more than what most of our students were doing. Okay, or if we maybe had a student who doesn't have a cell phone or any sort of device to send messages, and they were way down here on our number line at 0. Okay, that would be an outlier also. Okay, so a few vocabulary terms there that we want to use. All right, so you guys are going to go practice this on your own now. Good luck.